also in the many side events that have been held here this week. They've been looking very seriously at issues of land restoration, and especially in the light of climate change and other challenges that continue to face us. So the side event is completely in line with the aspiration of this scope. Now, as you can see from the program, we will have welcome remarks from the chair of the Governing Council of the African Forest Forum. The Governing Council is like a governing board in many other institutions. It's the apex policy-making body for the African Forest Forum. Then we'll have an introduction which looks briefly at the context of this side event, how we came about thinking about it, especially the issues that we need to profile. There will be presentations on preliminary analysis on non-timber forest products value chains, specifically in the Great Green Wall areas in the Sahara and Sahel region. And then it will be followed by another presentation on gums and resins, value chain and shifting production, distribution of resources under climate change. And then the third one will be on land restoration approaches and practices in dry lands. And another presentation will be on innovative women-led mangrove restoration in Cameroon. This is an example of how this restoration is being done on the ground. Then there will be issues which look at related to tree germplasm development and management in support of forest and land restoration on the continent. Then at the end of all these presentations, we will have a few minutes to discuss or raise questions. So I will request if you have any question to any of the presenters, just write it down with the presenter so that when we come to the discussions, then you can tell us who should answer that question. After that, we'll have closing remarks from the chair of the Governing Council. Now, as a way of starting, let me introduce myself. My name is Godwin Kowero. I'm the Executive Secretary of the African Forest Forum, and will be moderating this session. I will therefore take this opportunity to welcome the Chair of the Governing Council to give us some brief opening remarks before we continue with the session. Chair, you're welcome.
Thank you. Our distinguished participants present here and those online, our invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Governing Council of the African Forest Forum, I welcome you to this hybrid side event taking place within the fringe of the ongoing UNCCD COP15 in Abidjan. I also welcome our guests and participants online and assure them that the next 2 hours to be shared with us will be remarkable and memorable. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the major objectives of African Forest Forum is to raise the profile of African forestry among all stakeholders, considering the contribution of forests and trees outside forests to income generation, livelihoods of our people on the continent, in addition to the intangible role of forest resources in the stability of the environment. Through the promotion of sustainable forest management practices, the African Forest Forum is able to provide for the continent an independent analysis and advice to national, regional, and intergovernmental organizations in addressing socioeconomic, food security, and environmental issues. Currently, members of AFF is getting close to 3,000, and we are still counting. Our members spread majorly across the African continent, as well as other continents of the world. Membership of the forum is open to individuals from academia, research, government, institutions, private sector, farmer organizations, and indeed others that are concerned with promotion of forest and tree resources management, as well as those willing to contribute their time and expertise towards promoting the mission of AFF, which is basically to improve livelihoods of the people of Africa and the environment they live in through sustainable management of the continent's tree and forest resources. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to enjoy the next 2 hours of our presentation on supporting livelihood and land restoration under a changing climate. I thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Now there follows a few introductory remarks on the background to this side event. And I will start by introducing the African Forest Forum. For those who are not very familiar with this, I have some 3 slides which I would share with you on the screen now. Yeah, given the time we have, we cannot talk a lot about the African Forest Forum, but I would just want to say that this is an association of the individuals who have the commitment and interest to improve the well-being of people and their environment by making good use of forest and tree resources through better management and on a sustainable basis. That is what characterizes AFF as an institution. These individuals are coming together on their own volition, and it grew out of popular demand that on the continent we didn't have an apex institution that can air the interests or bring together people who are interested in forests and trees outside forests. We have on the continent the African Forest and Wildlife Commission, which is managed by FAO and brings together heads of forestry and wildlife, but we don't have any other apex institution that brings other stakeholders in forestry. So the way the definition goes, you will see that the name African Forest Forum must give the impression that this is for professional foresters, but actually anybody who is interested in trees outside forests and in forests is welcome as a member. So we have from the around 3,000 members, around 40% of them are actual professionals in forests, but others are people of different backgrounds but with interest in forestry. Now, the purpose, we created this forum or this institution to first provide a platform like we have now to discuss issues which are related to forestry on the continent, and also to create an enabling environment for an objective, independent analysis, advocacy, and providing advice on all relevant policy and technical issues that are related to achieving sustainable management, use, and conservation of African forests and trees outside forests. The aim being to reduce poverty and also promote socio-economic development and environmental stability on the continent. So it's a people-centered institution aimed at the well-being of the people. Now, then the next slide, please. Now, the members decide what the institution should do. It's not the secretariat that decides this. We have a members forum. All the members meet once every 5 years because there are over 3,000. We do that electronically. And this year is the year they have to meet. We are going to organize a members forum fairly soon. They decide what the institution should do. And as you can see from this slide, we have membership in practically all African countries except around 4 of them, and also some members from outside the continent. These are people who have interest in African forestry, people who have worked and continue to work on African forest issues, and we call them the Friends of African Forests. So we have over 100 people from 32 countries outside the continent as members. The next slide, please. So the members have decided that we work around this programmatic approach to guide our work. There are 6 programmatic areas. The programmatic area 1 and 2 relate. The first one relates on how we manage the forests. And then the second one looks at what are the benefits of doing it. That is looking at the socioeconomic aspects. And also the third one looks at trees and environmental health. That's where we find our climate change program. And then we are also interested in forests and trees, how they contribute to food security. And then you will see in implementing these 4 areas, there is an external environment that's defined by policies and governance structures that define what we do around those 4 areas. And then there are cross-cutting issues in all of them, things like capacity building and skills development in all the 3 areas. And all the 3 areas generate considerable information which we have to manage, share, and look at the impact that information is generating. So briefly, that is what we do at the African Forest Forum. You can go to our website and just fill a form if you're interested to become a member. Membership is free for now. And the Governing Council meets once a year around April. And it decides on who becomes a member. And if you're a member, you can just download your certificate from the website. So those are a few remarks about who we are. Now, as you can see from our areas of emphasis, a central issue in our society is poverty. And we believe that this could get worse in arid and semi-arid areas that continue to be adversely affected by climate change. Now, on this premise, we thought that it would be worthwhile looking at how we can increase the resilience of such societies through improvement of important forest and tree-related value chains, especially in arid and semi-arid areas. And we started with value chains in the area, broad area of non-timber forest products. We first focused on natural gums and resins in the context of empowerment of women in the arid and semi-arid areas around the Great Green Wall of Sahara and Sahel region. And this followed a request from the African Union Commission that we look at this issue so that at least these value chains can empower women and youth because they're very much involved in them. So we focus on that one, and we shall share some information on that as you've seen in the program. Then as we're doing that, there was an initiative that is led by AFOAO in the same Great Green Wall area to contribute to development of a concept note and eventually a project to be submitted to GCF for funding. And we have contributed by analyzing other NTFPs in the Great Green Wall area. And this also effort will be discussed or presented by one of my colleagues here. Now, a starking reality in the semi-arid and arid areas is also the rapid deforestation and land degradation taking place there. Now, we thought that in tandem with these activities, we should evaluate ways for restoring such lands and forest areas, and particularly taking gender issues on board. And this will also be profiled by my colleagues later. Now, in general, when you are restoring forests and even degraded lands, we see that the use or employment of trees is very important. And we thought that we should look at the capacity on the continent to produce seeds or seedlings or planting material or technically germplasm. Do we have that capacity? And if we have it, how is it being employed? And this is a very important area. In any afforestation, reforestation activity, the seed defines whether you succeed or you don't succeed. So this will also be presented by one of my colleagues. Now, let me just briefly present to you the resource people who will be making brief presentations on some of these areas. There will be a presentation by my colleague, Dr. Jibril Dayamba. He's from Burkina Faso. He's a senior program officer with AFF. He works across the areas of climate change and livelihoods as well. And then we have Dr. Bench Kamai from Kenya. He's the executive secretary of the Network for Gums and Resins in Africa. He's seated on the, you can raise your hand. And we have Professor Lawanuma Amani from Niger. He is a former senior program officer with AFF. We worked together for 10 years. He was on sabbatical leave there, and then he has gone back to his university in Niamey. He is now a professor of forest ecology and agroforestry. Then we have Dr. Cecilia Jabert from Cameroon. She is the president of the African Women's Network for Community Management of Forests, popularly known as REFACOF. And above all, I think you will join me in congratulating her because she is the 2022 winner of the prestigious Wangari Maathai Forest Champions Award. This is an award which is given to outstanding people in the area of conservation and who have done something to improve livelihoods of people. And can we just give, she's here. We are proud to have an African who got this prestigious award during the World Forest Congress that ended last week in Seoul. She is just flying from Seoul to join us here, and she will make a presentation on some of the things we have discussed. Then we have Professor Marie-Louise Awana Tenchu from Cameroon. She is a senior program officer at African Forest Forum, and she leads our work on climate change. Now, with those introductions, let me now call on Dr. Jibril Dayamba to make his presentation. Jibril, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the floor. Good morning, colleagues and other participants online and the one present physically. as you have seen from the introduction of Prof, under this theme of the side event, we are trying to look in this first presentation how the value chain of non-timber forest product can be improved so that it contributes to the livelihood and also be an incentive for restoration initiative by the communities under a changing climate. So the title of the presentation is Preliminary Analysis of the Value Chain of Priority Non-Timber Forest Product Value Chains of the Great Green Wall area. It's actually a regional synthesis of studies conducted in 6 countries, namely Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Senegal, and Chad. And next, please. Next. Okay. In terms of introduction to this study, it's globally we all know the importance of NTFP, the potential that they have in terms of contributing to food security and nutrition, to health, to socio-economic development, and in also addressing the challenges of climate change. And on the slide on the left, I've picked in terms of numbers, the species, forest species that contribute as a non-timber forest product of different types. And in Africa, you see the most important figure that in Africa where we have around 300 species. These are data from the FAO publications. And on the slide on African map, you see that we have production of forest nuts. And the grading there shows the importance depending on the country where we are. The darkest one is where we have more than 100,000 tons of production of forest nuts in a year. And you can see that this is very important all over Africa from the north to the south, east, west. This work is being conducted in the context where FAO was preparing a multi-country project proposal which was to be submitted to the Green Climate Fund. And FAO has partnered with AFF to conduct some specific studies that could provide the baseline to the project being developed in terms of recommending actions that could be done to upgrade the value chain of specific NTFP so that the equity, the resilience, and also could be improved and also reduce the emission of greenhouse gases. I want to note that we should bear in mind that this study is being conducted in the context where for some of the NTFP, there are already advanced initiatives in terms of improving their value chain. So in case you don't see specific NTFP here and you think it's very important, we have that in mind, but this study was based on what stakeholders thought was important in their specific context. Next slide, please. So the objective of the study was to identify some key NTFP value chain that could be more equitable, climate resilient, and with high emission reduction potential. And if they are identified, we thought if we work on them, on those aspects, they could constitute an incentive for the smallholder producers to engage in the restoration of agro-silvopastoral landscapes. The objective also was to carry out literature review to see what are the ongoing and past intervention addressing these issues, and also to propose at the end actions that could upgrade the value chain of the non-timber forest product. Next. In terms of methodological approach, I have tried to summarize it here, but there were 5 phases. The first one was an inception workshop where actors were familiarized with the idea of the project which was being developed, and also that workshop was also where the priority NTFP were defined. It was mainly 3 that were prioritized in each of the countries. And then in the second phase, there was a literature review to try to see which are the institutional and regulatory framework in place, what are the socio-economic importance of those NTFP, the production potential, the actors involved, and so on. On the third phase, there was a key informant interview in the field and some focus group discussions to collect further information on those NTFP in terms of production, processing, trade in the targeted sites in the countries. The fourth and the fifth phase was to analyze the data and also come up with the report on the result, which were then validated in national workshops. The prioritized NTFP, as you can see from the table, there were Pakia biglobosa, commonly known in the region as Nere. There were Balanites aegyptiaca, and there were the baobab, and also the neem tree, Pileostigma reticulatum, which is the pods that I use, and we also have Ziziphus mauritiana, and we have the date tree, which are more, I should say, spread a lot in Niger. Next. In this prioritized NTFP, we noted that the prioritization was from the perspective of the communities based on of the actors based on the socio-economic importance of those NTFPs. And from the literature, you could also note that there were not wrong, NTFP has high contribution to the household income. And for some of the countries, it goes from 15 to 25% in West Africa. Also from the literature, the NTFP in general, not specifically those, contribute to the national economy, up to 5% GDP in some of the countries, 4% in others. Next. The actors in the value chain, we noted that at each step, like from the production, processing, and trades, there were many and diverse, but for these specific NTFPs, exporters category was very poorly developed in all targeted countries. And women were found to constitute the largest gender group among the actors, but their role and level of engagement changed between product and also from categories, the different actors categories. Next. Okay, in terms of the production of these species, the key highlight that we want to bring here is that most of the production were from the wild, the natural habitat, and this also poses a problem of how best we are conserving the potential of the resources. And another aspect we are noting is only for baobab leaves that there was some initiative of production as a food garden, specifically in Burkina Faso and Niger. In terms of profitability, which can also drive the production of the species, we have observed that the profitability was there only when the price was increased to a certain rate or the production rate is at a certain level. Otherwise, the way it is now, it might not be profitable for some of the actors. In terms of processing, for specific NTFPs, the processing capacity and techniques used were still very poor, while the market opportunities are coming up. This means we need to do something about that. Also the same for honey. The potential is there, but in some of the countries, the processing technologies and production capacity is still poor. Next, please. In terms of market, there are two aspects here, specifically for the NTFPs we targeted. they are still mainly traded through local and urban markets for the NTFP we targeted, but we also want to note that for some other NTFP, such as the shea butter, Burkina Faso has, for instance, exported 20% of its production to Ghana in 2018, and 94% of its tamarind to Senegal. And the country is also importing nere seeds from Ghana and Benin to process some spice that they later on export to Niger and Cote d'Ivoire. So there are trades between the countries, but for the specific NTFP we looked at, it was a very local level. Next. In terms of governance, we looked at the institutional framework which were in place to support the value chain of this sector and also the legal framework. As you can see, the assessment here, the scoring goes from poor to good, that's my fair, and existence of institutional link, clear link to a ministry, and the existence of an institution which is handling NTFP and clearly linked to a ministry. For almost all countries, that institution was there. A specific service in charge of the NTFP management, almost all countries it was there except for Nigeria, where it was judged that that aspect was poor. And as you can see, in terms of legal aspect, the existence of taxation framework and norms and national technical standard for the NTFP, those are the aspects where the assessment turned out to be rather fair or very poor. So summarizing, we are saying that the governing framework remained to be improved in several areas, especially with regard to appropriate taxation of NTFP, strengthening of technical standard, and the need to collect efficient data, to put in place efficient data collection system on NTFP statistics. How these NTFP and their management could contribute to climate change related issues, how to address the climate change related issues. The way it is now, it shows a mixed potential to contribute to addressing this issue. And the reason because these NTFP are profitable to almost all actors at a certain level, and the increasing demand of these products because of the market opportunities that are coming up, and the fact that the supplies are mainly based on the wild, there is tendency of overexploitation, and this can lead to carbons being emitted to the atmosphere. And we think there is need to develop alternative sources of supply of these products, for instance, plantation and domestication, agroforestry, rehabilitation of degraded land. If these are done judiciously, the existing carbon stock can be preserved, and also there is potential for increasing carbon sequestration. NTFPs, we know they have many potentials, and if we manage them well, we have also the opportunity to increase the government revenue through an expanded tax base, which will also provide more resources to address the climate change issues. We have summarized per level of value chain, stage of value chain, the different constraints that are there, and we have suggested some potential solutions. In terms of production, is the weak structuring and organization of the producers, the rudimentary storage systems, the challenges of resources regeneration, the overexploitation. Processing, we can note, for instance, the rudimentary processing tools, which also has an impact on the product quality and packaging. Okay. In terms of trading, the market is not well developed, and at the institutional level, there are still some work to be done to improve the environment in which we operate. As a result, we also note in terms of need for capacity building, there is capacity in terms of how to establish farms for producing this one, how to collect and harvest, the method for collecting and harvesting, the processing, and how to establish associations and cooperative for dealing with this, and the distribution and management of the resources, and policy and regulatory aspect of it. In terms of opportunities, there are new markets that we should try to size the opportunities, and production potential is there for some of them, though we still need to work on new initiatives to sustain them. And there are new actors coming in at the private and social level, and policies and governance framework to some extent are favorable. We just need to improve on some of the aspects. And there is opportunity also through a better management to increase carbon sequestration. Next. The strategy that we think should be put in place to help in upgrading the value chain. Four main aspects. We need to strengthen the NTFE production with emission reductions. We need to support the efficient and environment-friendly processing and improving quality of the NTFE, to support the commercialization and trade, also support the sustainability of the interventions. And in the figure on the right, there are detailed actions that are helping to contribute to the point on which we should work, and, as listed on the left. Next. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jibril, for that presentation. I would request that if you have any questions, you jot them down. We'll come to the discussion where you can raise them up. We're a little bit late, and I would request that we stick to around 10 minutes for each presentation. Now we go to the other set of NTFPs, and this is gums and resins, and Ben Chikamai will be taking us through this. Ben, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And good morning, colleagues and participants who are attending physically. And good morning, afternoon for those who are participating virtually. I'm going to share information on the gums and resins value chains, particularly looking at the distribution and production of these particular resources and commodities, as well as how they are being influenced by climate change. And I would like to start by sharing some general information by saying that Africa is the leading producer and exporter of some of these key plant gums, particularly gum arabic and gum caraya, for which it is practically the main producer as well as exporter. And I would also like to say that it is also the main producer and exporter of some of the gum resins, the three commodities that you are reading there, particularly when you try to look at myrrh, frankincense, and opoponax. And most of these particular commodities are produced in sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly within the Sahel, as well as the Horn of Africa. There are a number of countries currently producing 17, which are now members of the Network for Natural Gums and Resins in Africa. And I would like to be able to say that GARA is an African-wide organization that is helping member countries to develop a coordinated strategy for improving the production, sustainable production, for improving livelihoods, as well as the environment of the communities, as well as the member countries. Apart from the 17 countries, we have 10 other countries in West, Central, and Southern Africa that have the resources and have the potential to produce, but they are not yet commercialized, and this is an area we intend to be able to look into as we move forward. Next slide. I would like to say that these particular resources, they are plant resources, and they are known to combat the effects of climate change, particularly because they are able to fix carbon dioxide, an aspect that contributes to mitigation. But we also know that production and commercialization of these particular commodities contributes to the resilience and adaptation. And it is for this particular reason that the African Forest Forum and also FAO did identify these particular resources and commodities as potential for contributing to the resilience of the commodities. And that's how the African Forest Forum initiated work of trying to promote the opportunities for value addition to improve the conditions for building the resilience to climate change for the communities depending on this, besides trying to contribute to their livelihoods as well as to the economies of the member countries. And arising from this, they did contract Ngara to be able to undertake studies in 4 selected countries which have indicated there: Burkina Faso, Kenya, Niger, and Tanzania. There were a total of 7 objectives, but for purpose of today's presentation, I'm focusing on those that are given in pink color. The first objective was to review the distribution of the gums and resin producing species, including the aspect of the effect of climate change on their distribution, carry out a mapping, and be able to produce the updated maps on the production of potential in the member countries, representing the situation actually in Africa. The second was to undertake the value chain analysis of the gums and resins at country level, in addition to assessing their marketing as well as trade, and particularly look at the benefit sharing arrangements where the women play a very key role, as we shall be able to see. The other was to identify and undertake training needs assessment on actors of gums and resins, and from those identified gaps, prepare an updated training manual for purpose of trying to increase and enhance the capacity of those who are involved in the production as well as commercialization. And lastly was to look at, review the existing policies, the legal framework as well as the institutional framework, so that we can be able to establish a better enabling environment for purpose of production of these particular commodities. Next slide. Okay, these are the key findings that actually came out from the work that was done. And with respect to the production, status of the production of the resources and their management, the study did confirm that actually there are 2 main species which are the main producers of gum arabic, which are given there: Acacia or Senegalia Senegal, which has 2 varieties. In total, there are 4 varieties, but 2 were found to have been commercialized within the Sahel and the Horn of Africa. Variety Senegal, which is widely distributed, and variety Carensis, which is confined in the Horn of Africa. Again, there were 2 varieties of Sial. Variety Sial, widely distributed, and variety Fistula, which is confined within the Horn of Africa. And then among the gum resins, actually the ones we have shown here are those that were captured in the study countries, but we have many more when you try to look at it. We have actually 4 of them: the Comifera myrrha, which is the source of myrrh, as we know, mainly found in the Horn of Africa. There is another Comifera which produces the medicinal type, which is much more sought after, particularly in the East, in the Far East, and it's called Holtziana. It's also found in the Horn of Africa, as well as the Boswellia neglecta. But we know that in the rest of the Horn of Africa, there are others, Boswellia species, and even in the Sahel, like Boswellia dalzieli, which is available, although in West Africa, it has not been properly commercialized. In terms of management, what I would like to say is that most of these resources are still found in natural stands. There is limited management, and they are actually subject to threats of degradation as we move on. We therefore need to move forward to establish clear management protocols if we are to conserve and minimize the degradation that's taking place. The second aspect is the ecological shifts, and what I would like to say is that actually there are clear differences in the distribution of the resources among the countries when you are trying to look at the countries in the Sahel compared to the countries in the Horn of Africa. And this is because of the dynamics of the climate conditions in the two areas. We see a clear shift of moving southwards. As the desert extends southwards, they're actually trying to, conditions change, and this production is moving much more southwards, as influenced by the rainfall as well as the temperatures. And very good examples are for Niger and Burkina. Yet around the equator, what becomes very clear is that there is a shrinkage in the production areas. If you look at the map of Ethiopia, the one on the left is current, the one is projection for 2070. You find that there is a shrinkage in the production of the resources as we do that. And I would like to be able to say that similar observations were actually confirmed when we did resource assessment and we did trend analysis of the same. However, what is clear is that the drivers are the same, and climate change and accompanying human activities are some of the factors that are causing the contraction. As agricultural activities extend to take over, of course, the woodlands, you find that there's a contraction in the resource production. But more importantly, and what came out clear, is that in the recent past, insecurity is becoming an issue. And we do know that in Central Africa and part of West Africa, Boko Haram has become an issue in Niger, in Chad, in Cameroon, and as well as Nigeria, as well as the Islamic agents in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. In East Africa, Al-Shabaab are also a big threat and are affecting the production and the distribution of the resources as we move on. The second aspect is now the stakeholder analysis and actually benefit sharing. And we looked at many actors along the value chain as well as those supporting. But for purpose of today's presentation, I just want to focus on those along the value chain. And you say that collectors are the first major players and the first group of actors in the value chain. We found out that women are major players in the harvesting and post-harvest handling. In Eastern Africa, up to 75% of the players are women in the aspect of collection, cleaning, sorting, and packaging. And then when you move to the other areas, you find that actually West Africa, 45 to 55% come on board. We therefore think that this is a group that we should focus on in building the capacity and empowering them as we move on. In terms of benefit sharing, what became clear is that if this sector is properly developed, it can contribute to empowerment of the collectors and particularly the women. Because if you look at the income that they are getting, it's reasonable, between 45 to 55%, and therefore we need to be able to focus on that. On training needs assessment, next slide. I would like to say that we did a training needs assessment and we identified various gaps in 3 areas of production, trade and markets, policies, institutions, as well as the regulations. And we reviewed a previous master plan, training manual, and what we did actually come up with is that most of the topics are still relevant, but we were able to generate additional topics, particularly in matters of policy, legal framework, formulation, as well as strengthening of the user groups. The next slide gives you actually the modules of the training module. These are being actually developed, and we believe that if this particular module is finalized, it will be able to enhance the capacity of various categories of stakeholders at different levels, and that will be able to help us enhance the production as well as the commercialization of the commodities. Next slide. We now have the policies and laws, but I don't want to spend much time on that, is that what I would like to say is that the policies have not been properly addressed in most countries. Where they are, we find that the implementation is weak. Most of them are sectoral. And we therefore need to be able to ensure that there is harmonization of these particular policies at sectoral level across sectors so that we can be able to contribute meaningfully to improving and enhancing the enabling environment, both in terms of the policies as well as the laws. In institutional framework, again, we find there are challenges that are coming on board, and we need to be able to look into that. What are our key messages? Number one is for camps and residents to play a role in improving livelihoods and economies while contributing to mitigation and adaptation. We should be able to give priority to capacity building. Capacity building is an area that we need to be able to give good priority. There is also a need to develop the value chains in most of the producer countries by streamlining, as we saw, challenges that are actually coming on board. Taxation in a number of countries is a challenge. It needs to be reviewed and harmonized. And also there's need to create enabling environment through policies, laws, and institutional frameworks. So finally, just the last slide. Yes, what are the key recommendations? We need to develop programs for restoration of degraded areas with identified gum and resident producing species for long-term sustainability. We need to develop capacities for key players and streamline their value chains. We need to develop processing capacity of gums and resins in selected countries so that the accrued benefits can go to the players, and particularly those who are along the value chains. And we need to develop an enabling environment by coming up with the clear policies, laws, and institutions that can be able to support the sector. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben, for that very good presentation. Colleagues, I think you have seen the potential of these NTFPs in improving the welfare of the people in these regions, as well as containing some of the adverse effects of climate change. However, as I said earlier, it is also in these areas that there is considerable land degradation and also deforestation. And so we have to look at how we can protect these resources from disappearing through these land degradation and deforestation problems. So the next two presentations will look at the issues of land restoration, and the first presenter will be Professor Mahamani Lawanu from Niger. Please, Lawanu, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Godwin. Good morning, dear colleagues. I'm going to make this presentation for this sad event. I understand that time is really against us, and I'm going to take almost 15 minutes to 10 to 15 minutes to make my presentation. The title of my presentation is just scaling up land restoration approaches and practices in dry lands, and what are the implications on food security and our livelihoods. With regard to land restoration practices, I know we have several practices and technology that have been developed and being upscaled in various parts of the dry lands. But in terms of best practices, I just picked these definitions. What do we mean by best practices for forest and landscape restorations? According to IUCN and World Research Institutes, there are practices which help ensure that restoration is successful, lasting, and beneficial. And also, there are practices that involve trees and other woody plants in landscape where appropriate. That can be scaled up successfully for individual sites. That restore functionality of ecosystem services and not original forest cover. That balance our local needs with national and global priorities and employ a range of restoration strategies, adapt to some consensus over time, and finally, that avoid strategy that lead to the conversion of natural ecosystems. That's what these two institutions put as key factors to identify best practices in dry lands. Now, some of the examples of land restoration and techniques and technologies that were being used in West Africa. This is the example of Niger, for example. And Niger can be considered as a laboratory for that. Jibril? Yeah. So, yeah, those are some of the practices like farmer managed natural regeneration here. What's it? Ah, okay. Yeah, just next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, no, the other one, yes. Now, what are the categories of innovation for land restorations? There are two main categories or types of supporting innovations when you come to land restoration. We have innovations that support or address other problems that hold land degradation in place. And the second category are supporting innovations that improve the enabling environment for scaling the core innovations. So there are two main categories of innovations. And these innovations, next slide please. The main innovations and the supporting innovation, that are the criteria to identify these main innovations and supporting innovations when you come to land restoration practice. Next slide, please. And we have identified 10 elements or ingredients for scaling up land restorations. Some of the ingredients or elements for example, technology and practices, awareness and demand, business cases, value chains that we have just talked about, finance, knowledge and skills, collaboration or cooperations, evidence and learning, leadership and management, and public sector governance. So these are the key ingredients for scaling up any given innovation. And we categorize them into 5 or 6 pillars for scaling up best techniques or technologies in the area. The first pillar is we should have a strong government leadership with effective coordination of sustainable land management. The second one is a good governance and recognition of each party's rights and resources. All the parties, we should recognize their rights over the resources. And the third pillar, that is very important, is the people-centered sustainable management of restored sites with profitable agricultural productivity. The use of the restored site. We do not restore just for the sake of restoring, but there should be, these restored sites should be beneficial to the local communities or the environment in which we are working in. The fourth pillar is in-depth knowledge, that's capacity building and adaptive practice management based on lesson learned. Yes, there are a lot of lessons learned that are being disseminated, and I think we need to take advantage of that so that in order to help us to build our kids. I think this pillar is very, very important. Pillar 5 is behavior change, social case and resolution and conflict resolution. Yes, we see over these restored lands, there are a lot of interest, and some of the stakeholders may be conflicting, and in some cases, there are even deaths of humans and loss of materials. And the last one is an external consultation for stakeholder engagement. Yes, we need, in fact, to engage all the stakeholders. That's in order to collectively embark on this dynamic. Now, after passing through all these pillars, we thought that creating and enabling policies and legislative for scaling up innovation is very, very important. And we have a lot of examples from the Sahel regions, which is really, by definition, dry lands. So a lot of enabling policies, legislations that help us now to smoothly conduct our activity in terms of scaling up any innovation. We have some examples, for example, from Niger, yes, that are being presented here, how to mainstream regreening into existing and new agricultural development projects, and also some of the strategies that were developed in the country. Next slide, please. Now, having said that, there are several initiatives at the regional, in terms of Africa and global arena, like the AFR 100, that's African Reforestation initiatives, AFR 100, where there was a lot of an initiative that targeted to restore 1 million hectares of land. And this, during this AFR 100, several countries make some pledge. For example, Niger pledged to restore 3.2 million hectares of degraded land by 2030. Burkina Faso, 5 million hectares. Chad, 1.4 million hectares. Mali, 10 million hectares. Senegal, 2 million hectares. So these are the pledges. And there are almost 31 African countries that make such kind of pledge to restore 100 million hectares by 2030. So we'll see that only five Sahelian countries did commit themselves to pledge for restoring 21.6 million hectares of degraded lands. Yes, that are the pledge, the ambition, the intention, but or their commitment. In terms of achievement, what is really on the ground? What's really on the ground? That's a big question mark that really, because the reality may be probably different. Next slide, please. Now, yes, there's this need to restore degraded land so that we can increase agricultural productivity. But there's another impediment, the population growth in most of our country, especially in the dry lands. If you see, for example, in May 2022, Niger's estimated population is 27 million, compared to an estimated 17.1 million in 2012. That's in 10 years, almost 10 million people have increased, and 2022 growth rate of 3.79%, which is the highest in the world. In May 2022, Burkina Faso had an estimated population of 22 million, with a rate of 2.8, and Chad 17.4 million in 2022. So you can see how the population is really increasing. So it's really another impediment. Next slide, please. Now, the pledge is good, but we thought that it's very ambitious and insufficient target given the rate of demographic growth in all of these dryland countries. If we consider, for example, my country, that is the Niger Republic, in 2030, Niger's population will have increased by about 8 million people. By about 80 million people in 2030. 2030 is just nearby. That is in 8 years. So, which means an average of 0.25 hectares of restored land per capita for each additional person. And if in 2030, the population reach of Niger will be 35 million, it is just about 0.1 hectare of land per person, of restored land, which is not really enough to, feed the overgrowing population. Implication? The targets need to be much higher than 3.2 million hectares. Of 3.2 million hectares needs to be achieved in the next 5 years rather than by 2030. So it has to be later. So we have to really increase our efforts in this. And I'm happy that for this particular country, that's the Niger Republic, I have all the decision makers, the PS, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, and the Director General of Forestry in charge of land restoration in the country there in this room. And probably it's a good message for them that they can take as a message home. What does it mean for food and nutrition requirement for all these countries? The challenge will be to accelerate upscale restoration of degraded lands. More than the 213,000 hectares per year as pledged by Niger Republic. We need to be more, double for that, or quadruple that. So in 2017, only 32,000 hectares were rehabilitated. As against the pledge, please come back, as against the pledge of 213,000 of hectares. Now, no, just go back. Go back. Yeah. So what does it mean for food and nutrition requirement? Yes, that's we should need really we have to create jobs on reclaimed lands, and we should target also the key vulnerable groups in that country. Next, please. Yeah, the level of investment to meet the needs of the growing population. You see several examples, for example, for the case of Niger, where we can create 2 million jobs on the rehabilitation of degraded lands in the country. Next slide, please. So, where we should put more effort, focus our efforts. And we have identified 5 key areas. One area is to increase productive lands, that is water harvesting techniques to restore degraded land. The second, to accelerate upscaling low-cost technologies affordable to small-scale farmers, climate-smart options for agricultural production, diversification of agricultural produce on reclaimed lands, diversification and densification of existing agroforestry systems. In conclusion, Chair, from this presentation, a lot of evidence out there. So what important message do you take home? What extra efforts are needed for us to move forward in reclaiming more lands or in making degraded lands more productive to feed the ever-increasing population? And there is a policy implication on this issue. We should change our policies in various aspects, in terms of demography, in terms of more investment, etc., etc. So, Chair and colleagues, at the end of my presentation, and I thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lawanu, for that very good presentation, and I think there are a lot of take-home messages from there. Now we move quickly to a next presenter, and that is none else but Dr. Cecilia Jabert. You have 15 minutes to let us know what women are doing in terms of restoration. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, moderator. We'll be sharing some innovative women-led forest restoration initiative in Africa. And our presentation will be scheduled in this order. We'll have a short profile on Refakov. Next, please. Okay, we'll have a short profile on Refakov, and then a short background information on women's contribution in the forestry sector in Africa. And we'll follow with some women-led forest restoration initiative. I will going to share 3 cases. We have many of them, but because of time allocation, we'll share 3 from Cameroon, from Cote d'Ivoire, and from Togo, and then some challenges and key messages and the conclusion. So what is the African Women Network for Community Management of Forests? Refakov is a network of women that was created in May 2009 in Yaoundé, Cameroon. Next, please. And it composed today of 20 West and Central African countries, including Madagascar. It's an advocacy platform that focuses on African women's tenure rights in land and forest reforms. Refakov's mission is to promote women's rights in Africa and advocates to shape policies and practices for gender equity in relation to land and forest tenure. We have 4 areas of intervention: capacity building, tenure reforms, advocacy and experience sharing, and we have a component on women's economic empowerment. And you will see our contacts through the website www.refakov.net, and then we have our email and Twitter and all the rest. Next, please. Here is the map of members of Refakov. We have Benin, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Liberia, Madagascar, Mali, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, Togo, the DRC, and the DRC. Next, please. What women are doing in the forestry sector in Africa. First of all, women represent more than 50% of the population in most of our African countries. And they produce just over 70% of the food in Africa. The agricultural food that we are eating are produced by women for at least 70%. And women are also the largest group of forest users and tree growers in Africa. They are well recognized in that. They are involved in tree nursery, in tree planting, mangrove restoration, collection of non-timber forest products, and many other activities. There are also community forestry business promoters in some countries, like Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and Togo. And also they are leading non-timber forest product exploitation in many African countries. We have some example here. Next, please. We'll have, you see these photos, you will see what we call ginseng, you will see bush mangoes, you'll see some cosmetics. These products are produced by women. They are exploited by women from the forest, and they are now more and more involved in business development. And you will see that in these photos. Next, please. Some women-led restoration initiative. We're going to share one in Cote d'Ivoire. And we have here in Cote d'Ivoire a great initiative on agroforestry, which is carried out by Malebi women. Malebi is an association member of REFACOF. And the government of Cote d'Ivoire granted 4,500 hectares of forest concession to Malebi in the Hawa classified forest in 2011. In their effort, in their restoration process, Malebi Women's Association succeeded to establish 200 hectares with agroforestry activities. You'll see the photos of the combination between trees and cassava. And they have been generating great income from the sales of cassava, while they are also gradually rehabilitating the forest that was quite degraded. The next initiative is from Togo. It's also an agroforestry scheme with the support of the International Tropical Timber Organization. And these women of the Blita and Lakes Prefecture in Togo are engaged also in agroforestry and they are combining sometimes cassava and trees. Some of them are combining maize and trees. And you see last year, they produced nearly 30,000 seedlings of forestry species that they use to restore 20 hectares of degraded land in Togo. And the last initiative is the restoration process initiative in Cameroon, where women in Longi Women's Association started since 2014 to restore degraded mangrove land in their communities. And with the support of the government and some development partners, they are now gradually rehabilitating the degraded mangrove along the coast of Cameroon. In last year, they planted nearly 800,000 mangrove seedlings along the Douala estuary. With this initiative, there are also a lot of challenges. And the first challenge is making gender equality a reality in the forestry sector. As you all know, the forestry sector is a male-dominated one, so it's not easy for women to really get a say in the sector. Of course, we recognize some progress now, and we hope they will sustain. And we have the second challenge on land and forest property rights. We need really to address women's insecure tenure rights if you want to upgrade and to improve what women are doing so far. And we also have a challenge on upscaling women's successful initiative by addressing women. How can we address women's access to finance and other capital? How can they access the credit and funding mechanisms? Those are very necessary for them to improve and to upscale their initiative. Access to decision making is another challenge. Putting women at the center of the ecosystem restoration in Africa should be a key to the successful decade on ecosystem restoration. And addressing climate change, of course, social crises and pandemics all over Africa is still to be addressed. Engaging men and young male in these gender-related activities, in these forestry sectors, in the securing women's access to tenure is a big challenge, and also capacity building on gender for forest staff and policy makers. So, what will be the key messages? The key messages is here for us to understand and agree that women play a key role in the forestry sector in Africa, and there is a need to support women's initiative to achieve the sustainable forest management in this continent, to also achieve effective climate change response and effective poverty reduction in our continent. So gender equality should be a must in the forestry sector in Africa. And to conclude, I will say that African women are committed to planting 20 million trees as their contribution to the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. They need your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Cecil, for this. That is from our Wangari Maathai Forest Champion of 2022. Now, to wrap up these presentations, especially when it comes to restoration issues, we have to look at the germplasm that we are using. And none else than Professor Marie-Louise Havana-Tencho is going to address this issue in the next presentation. Marie, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Prof, for giving me the opportunity. Indeed, we cannot talk about restoration and ignoring the seed, the main input in forest restoration. So I will share with you a presentation. Next, please. I will share with you a presentation following the outline there, which is actually a combination of a study undertaken by AFF and also a recent literature in terms of seed provision for forests and landscape restoration in Africa. So next, please. So defining what we mean by forest restoration is, I think, is the first step. We have to know that it is an inclusive and landscape approach that can help to reverse land degradation, increase carbon sequestration, conserve biodiversity, and create sustainable livelihood for local communities. So this is why it's been getting more and more attention. And this will be, is aiming to regain ecological functionality and enhance human well-being across degraded and deforested forest landscape, focusing mainly on participation, adaptive management, and consistent monitoring and learning framework. So there are basically in Africa 3 approaches for forest and landscape restoration. You have they can create plantation, development of plantation, natural forest management with enrichment planting and all others, and then you have small-scale driven initiative which are considered to be the main contribution in this forest and landscape restoration in Africa. Next, please. So based on that, there have been too many initiatives, among which Africa alone committed for 700 million hectares of forest to be restored. And this, so to achieve this, the African government have made a very ambitious restoration commitment. And there are some of the initiatives there, the Green Wall for Sahara and Sahel with 100 million hectares to be degraded land to be restored in the Sahel. We have the Afri 100 with 100 million hectares by 2030. And also the Pan-African Agenda on Ecosystem Restoration for Building Resilience, targeting 200 million hectares land to be restored by 2030. And then we have many other initiatives that require also afforestation and reforestation, among which we have the Clean Development Mechanism, the RED Plus, and the Glasgow Pact with the very strong commitment and also pledge to support forest conservation and regeneration, the Bond Challenge, and the land degradation neutrality of the UN CCD, and many other national requirements for tree planting. Next, please. So, next. So my colleague, Professor Lawanu, talked about this plate for the Afri 100. You can see that the share among countries. So now they have almost exceeded what was initially planned by 28 million acres. So there is already an increase showing a strong political will. And this will require a 1 billion development finance and also a 481 million private sector commitment to support this reforestation. Then we have some success factor that could support this in Africa. The local ownership and stakeholder engagement, they are on the ground, and these people are already highly committed in planting trees. You have high-level political support. You have some champions, like our champions here, that generate momentum to bring more stakeholders. You have also access to finance. There are many financial opportunities around there. Relevance and linkage with many other priorities in global context. The fight against the containing climate change, the fight against desertification, among others. And there is also some mean for knowledge sharing and lesson learning. And we have some favorable policy environment for long-term sustainability and also partnership and collaboration. So among the challenges that really affect this initiative, you have the rate of deforestation and forest degradation still being very high in Africa. We have the problem of land tenure, and that sometimes creates some insecurity and conflict. You have insufficient human and technical capacity to effectively implement forest and landscape restoration. And then we have lack of locally relevant tools for forest and landscape restoration, and sometimes information gaps and the insufficient mechanism to share the result hamper the dissemination of success stories and inability to build for existing knowledge and expertise. So, but among these, we have two main challenges: the supply of seed for appropriate and preferred species, and also genetic diversity, because we have to make sure that this forest restoration continue to maintain the genetic integrity of our forests. So we have here some principle and guiding element for forest land restoration that focusing on 6 main principles, focusing on landscape, engaging stakeholder and supporting participatory governance, restore multiple functions for multiple benefits, and maintain and enhance natural forest ecosystem within landscape, tailor the local context using a variety of approaches, and also manage adaptative for long-term resilience. Then, so this study, next please. Okay. So this study now is focusing on the need for efficient tree germplant supply system if we want to have a successful landscape restoration in Africa. So to do that, we explore institutional and operational frameworks for tree germplant development and management in support for forest and land restoration in Africa. And our methodology approach here focus on first a study conducted, as I said, by AFF from 2014 to 2018, and trying to assess the status and trend in tree improvement and tree germplant supply in Africa. And secondly, we try to do an updated literature review on tree germplants for forest land restoration initiative. So we start by trying next to share some priority species across Africa. You have indigenous commercial tree species along Africa. You have indigenous fruit trees. You have the list there. I will not go through it, but you can have, we will be sharing this PowerPoint if need be. So, but it was important to show that there are some priority species that are driving this process. And also in terms of also the tree improvement activities mainly implemented in Africa, you have the hybridization, you have sexual and vegetative propagation of these species based on selected and preferred trees, and provenance and progeny trial that help to prepare and to have improved planting material. And also there was a specific focus on priority species for agroforestry, for forestry, and also exotic species being planted in West and Central Africa. So the step in this tree improvement start by selecting plus tree, and then after selecting plus tree, this plus tree is now how can I say? The plus tree will be managed to produce planting material. This planting material will be used now, will be used for vegetative propagation with the aim to produce true to type material. So the vegetative propagation will now be used to develop improve tree orchard, and this tree orchard will be the basic for improved material for planters. And but we can also use tree seeds that will be tested and documented, and therefore share also with farmers through seedlings. So what are the main attributes for tree germplants for forest and landscape restoration in Africa? We have the main supply, among the supplier of tree seed, you have mainly projects, meaning that this activity is being driven by many projects ongoing in the continent. We have, as main type of germplants, we have seedling produced from nursery, and also as main source of germplants, we have the natural forest. meaning that we have very little investment in producing this planting material. And also the main criteria guiding the tree planters will be to select material close to the target site, with more than 51% of them having their trees in this area. So the principle in tree germplasm deployment and flow is to first of all think about what is the objective of the tree planters. Based on the objective, he will now identify the need, techniques and technology and finance associated, and then put in place a tree seed supply system, taking into account the policy, the seed supply flow, the gene conservation and research and development, all those. But is it really an assessment done by Lileso and all in 2021 indicate that there is a broken chain, in the process of supplying the seed, because many in many contexts you don't have information flow between the tree producer and the end users. And also we have in the procurement and deployment pathway in Africa, we have three main models. You have the centralized model, when in a country we have effective and functional operational national tree seed center. We have the decentralized model, where many actors contribute actually to produce and to share tree seed. And you have the NGO model, where the NGO and other actor plays the huge role. And this is what is actually being implemented in many countries in Africa. NGOs and private sector are the one playing huge role in providing this planting material. So by doing this approach also affects the quality, the expected quality we are for this material. Because if all of our material is being managed by NGO and other sector, not in a control system, then we are expecting to have some genetic loss. And therefore, we have to be careful, because the forest land restoration may not lead to the real benefit we are expecting. Among the actors involved, you see that the National Tree Center and the Public Forestry Agency and nursery operators, NGO, plays the main role along the value chain. And what are the challenges of these planters? The planters, for all of them, they have a problem of accessing preferred provenance and origin for the good material, overall lack of planting and nursery material, or no origin of this material, leading therefore for them to not capitalize on improved practice. And the consequence of these challenges is that there is a higher cost if you want to produce improved material, and there is delay in restoration, and also some sites you have to be restored many times to be able to have some concrete results. And the type of support needed by these, the actors are practical guidance on how to develop improved material, training course on all the associated techniques, and technical standards available to support this improved material, and digital decision support apps that can help them to follow through what is being done. So, and we also went through to assess what are the costs associated in producing this planting material, and we see that the main cost associated is on the maintenance of post-plantation maintenance. This is in line with what has been said, that we don't need to plant trees, but we need to grow trees. So it's important to focus on what the main challenge will be to make sure that the tree we have planted is growing very well. And also, when looking about grass and shrubs, we see that planting seedling from cutting will also attract some additional costs, meaning that improvement has some costs we have to bear with. So one other important aspect to take in account in terms of GEM+ is the importance of an enabling environment. This enabling environment will actually facilitate the move from a low productivity and low quality landscape restoration to move towards a demand-driven forest land restoration, where we have the norm in place to make sure that the quality of the material we are using, the way we are using them, and the appropriate conditions are put in place to guarantee their benefit. And one aspect also important nowadays is the adaptability of these GEM+ to climate change. So we have also in many countries now studying being implemented to evaluate the response of this material to environmental stresses, and also some climatic parameters niche modeling to assess what could be the potential of a changing climate on geographic distribution of these species. These studies are really important to identify what are the future planting areas, facilitate a GEM+ translocation potential, and also determine species plasticity potential, and therefore fulfill species response to climate change. Based on all these set of factors, Framework and all developed in 2021 a diversity for restoration tools that help to, that is a stepwise approach to develop and make sure that we have a recommended species combination on the at landscape level. We have a recommended seed zone and seed sources available, and propagation information on the propagation of each species, and therefore a framework to monitor their improvement, how they behave. So though we have therefore many planting activity happening in Africa, we still have some implementation gaps. Among those gaps, we have reduced investment in forestry research and development to make sure that all these indigenous species are well documented. We need privatization of the commercial seed production that will make, will improve the investment in this sector, and also poor infrastructure and low institutional capacity in most seed centers that do not favor production, sustainable production of GEM+. The seed deployment pathway also varied, need to be strengthened. And also restrictive movement of research GEM+. When you want to do research on GEM+, there are many requirements, political policy requirements that need to be fulfilled, and this also affects the distribution. So as many recommendations at policy level, we need to increase this to support the research in tree breeding to guarantee that steady supply of good quality material is ensured. We need to rationalize local regulation to ensure smooth movement of genetic material and comply with international agreements. We need tree planting initiatives to be budgeted and in the procurement in advance of operation. We need also better understanding of forest statistics to predict seed demand. At institutional level, we need to define the role of all the stakeholders involved in the seed supply system. We need to build the capacity of the personnel and improve infrastructure for seeds handling. We need to promote regional networking and field exchange and form links with Safogen network that could also help to document genetic resources. Technically, we need to target some key species, document and certify seed sources. We need to upgrade the infrastructure, specifically in national tree seed centers. We need to use mobile technology to monitor flowering and seed production in forests and promote seed exchange, document field performance for new species to inform operational planting. So as key messages, we have the contribution of tree seed gem plant to forest land restoration. We strongly need capacity building in the following areas: seed source identification, characterization, and management, combine conventional and modern approach of tree improvement for selected priority species. Modern seed collection, handling, and processing has to be there to make sure that the quality seed is supplied to end users. The seed testing and processing and storage for proper documentation of seed load, as well as recommendation for appropriate pre-treatment to be applied to seed for better performances. We also need to develop plant breeding and seed technology curricula in many forestry research and education institutions and facilitate access to graduate fellowship opportunities for this type of studies. So based on that, I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Marie, for that very interesting presentation. And that is the last presentation we have for this event. As you can see, we started from looking at these very fragile areas, semi-arid and arid areas, and we saw some potential in terms of improving the livelihoods or the welfare of the people in those regions through NTFP-based value chains. And also, we saw some potential in terms of their restoration, and the practices that exist to facilitate the restoration and how some of them can be improved. And also we saw the role of women. There was examples on the role of women in this effort. However, when it comes to the planting material that we need, or the germplasm, we see some handicaps here and there, as outlined by Marie. So it means that this issue, we have to consider it very holistically and not piecemeal for us to have some success on it. Now, I would like to open this for some few minutes of discussion. I'm aware as of yesterday, we had close to 200 people who had registered to follow this online. I believe many of them are still following this online. We have some questions from people following this online. I will give preference to those questions first. We take the people online, and then we come to the people who are in this room. So, Dawood, if you have scanned these questions, can you direct them to the appropriate person to respond, please?
Thank you so much, Prof. Online, I managed to capture a few questions, and these are being directed to Ben, Cecile, and Professor Awano. So I will start with a question that is aimed at Dr. Ben Chikamai. It's from Antoine Kalinganire. It reads, degradation of the land and resource is beating hard. I fully support the idea of developing land restoration programs. But what was the contribution of Ngara in the planting of gums and resins trees producing species in the African drylands? So that's the question to Ben. The question that goes to Cecile reads as follows. thanks Cecile for a wonderful presentation and congrats for the award. Regarding the role of women in the management of forests, I really wonder the progress made by REFACOF in promoting the access and ownership rights to forests and restored lands by women, especially in the West African drylands. Then the question, I think this is rather a comment to Professor Wano. There are two people who commented. First is Dr. Gugo Joel. He says security, research, and training are important issues in ASALs that needs to be addressed. Then Anita says, I agree with you, Dr. Gugo Joel. I have come across a situation where a community outrightly rejected the establishment of a forest within their boundaries, citing the potential for it to become a hideout for hoodlums, bandits, and terrorists. Insecurity is becoming a driver of deforestation in many communities. Prof, those are the comments that I managed to get from the chat. Otherwise, the other comments are just basic comments, but these are the ones that I thought would need commenting from the presenters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's take the questions from online. Ben, you had a question direct to you. We start with the ones for Ben. I can see quite a number of hands raised from online. We'll take them up as well. So if you can just hold on, we answer these questions first, and then we ask them to ask their questions directly. Yeah, Ben, quickly, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks Antoine for the question on the role that Ngara did play. Sometime between 2004 and 2010, there was a regional program called Acacia Operation, which was executed by FAO, and Ngara was providing the regional component and coordination. We did participate in 5 countries: Senegal, Niger, Chad, Sudan, and Kenya, in coming up and piloting what we call the mechanized water harvesting technology by Valerani. That was the first piloting that was undertaken, and a total of about 15,000 hectares were rehabilitated in the 5 countries. The technology has been taken up and upscaled, and recently Action Against Desertification has continued to upscale that particular technology in the rehabilitation in the various countries in the Sahel. So we did play a contribution, and we believe that going forward, we shall be able to continue and try to make a further contribution when opportunities become available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Now we move to Cecile.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof, and thanks for the questions and for the congratulations for the prize. It's from all of us. Thank you so much. Is it on?
Yeah, close. Move close.
Okay. So the question was on the progress that REFACOF has done, especially in West Africa, in advancing women's right to tenure. The progress is very little. Thank you. The progress is very little because we are engaged in policy reforms, and the policy reforms takes a lot of time. We have anyway succeeded to move a step forward with countries like Togo, the Gambia, Liberia, and Burkina Faso, where today we have succeeded to have some documented land title for the women in those countries, and now they are also implementing their activities with more security and more insurance. We are still in in many other countries in the process of reform, and we hope that we'll continue to push, and by the end of the decade on landscape restoration, we will be able to produce the statistics of what RIFACOF has been supporting and what we have been able to achieve. So this is a long-term process, but I'm positive because more and more government are more responsive than in the past years. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Cecile. Lawanu, please, just 1 minute to take the issues that are addressed to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Gorwin. Yeah, the issue of security is real. I can give some example. For example, in Niger, we know where the insecurity, most of the restoration work have stopped. That's for sure, because people, they are fearing for their lives, and they cannot move or go even local communities. They are really leaving their areas because of the fear of being attacked. That's the same situation in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Chad, and in Nigeria, the northern part of Nigeria around the Borno state. Not even Borno state, it's the whole northwestern part of Nigeria is being threatened by that issue, and most of the restoration work have stopped. And also, I know around the area in the eastern part of Niger, where Boko Haram is holding. In fact, people now, they are killing, they're destroying all the trees because they say this is a hideout for rebels and for terrorists. So all these forests with Prosopis flora, glandulosa are being destroyed because people are saying that they don't hide out for rebels. So the issue of insecurity is real and is threatening our effort for restoration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lanu, for that elaboration. Let me take 2 questions from the plenary here, and then we go online. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hands online already. Yeah, from this side, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Prof, for recognizing me. My name is Ted Kamoto from Malawi. And let me start by thanking all the presenters for very insightful presentations that I've made. I have one small observation, because I think I didn't hear that from all the presentations that I heard. Issue to do with land tenure. Because I was looking at the issue of, like the first presentation where we're looking at the NTFPs. The observation was right that now they are becoming more popular and people want to eat something from the wild. And that brings in the challenge in terms of where we can get these, because now people are beginning to be a bit strict in terms of allowing other people to do that. So I don't know whether there was a deliberate attempt to look at that. But I'm happy to hear that issues of gender and the like were addressed in some of the presentations. But I think the issue of land tenure, I don't know whether there was an attempt to tease out that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that is a central issue, and I can see they are all nodding that they've taken it up. You know, the presentations were very brief, so we couldn't offload everything, but most of this information is on our website. If, yeah, please. Let me take another hand from this side. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. And then thank you to all the presenters, and then as well as the team from RIFACOF. In the Gambia, the Gambia chapter was supported by RIFACOF, and then
can you introduce yourself? As
I am Mr. Mohamed Jaite from the Gambia. Yes, Mohamed Jaite, director of the Department of Forestry. I want to recognize the support of RIFACOF in the establishment of, the Gambian chapter. And then also the department is supporting them in the establishment of a nursery. We have allocated a land to them. And then we are now developing the infrastructure through the FAO support. And then as well as to give them more support, in the decision making. Now the president of RIFACOF is the vice president of the National Farmers Platform, so that he can speak on behalf of the women who are involved in community forest management. And then, I think, at least that is a very good move. But I did not hear you mention the Gambia, as part of the 17 countries that are involved in the RIFACOF. So I hope you don't want to, you are not, disengaging our team. But what I wanted to ask is about the issue with Ivory Coast, as your case study mentioned that they are involved in agro-silvo-cultural activities in a designated area. Whether the tenure security is being finalized so that it will not be, an investment that will be in vain after the trees are matured for the women to benefit. I think this has to be regularized. If you can share with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We take one here and then we go to the people online.
Okay, thank you, Prof. My name is Patrice Savardogo. I'm working for the FAO, based in Dakar, Senegal, for the sub-regional office covering the 15 countries of ECOWAS. Thank you for the very good presentation, and also I want to commend the good work that Prof is doing, and under his leadership of IFF, really in taking forward forestry issues in Africa. I have just one small comment, maybe related to the last presentation, that is mainly focusing on how we really get a very good stock of germplasm for our restoration purpose. I'm wondering if at IFF level there is a need, or maybe you have undertaken those kind of studies, investigation, looking into more those kind of forgotten native dryland and shrub species that are sources for food. I think more and more when people talk about germplasm, they tend to focus on those species that are commercially valued. When people talk about non-timber forest product, we think more on the market side, forgetting those really forgotten native species. We all know that coming from the Sahel part, there are species maybe we are losing from day to day, and they are very nutritious in terms of, they are very good in terms of nutrition. So I don't know if at AFF there is any work undertaken on that. I know you are doing very good work with FAO in the Great Green Wall, and I just want to check if there is any review work, desk work that has been undertaken. Thank you, and over.
Thank you very much for those observations, which are very critical. And Marie, do you want to take a minute also to respond to that before we go on to the people online?
Thank you for that very good comment. Yes, actually we, for example, taking about the land tenure, maybe I start with that. We mentioned it. We mentioned it in the like one of the key challenges in terms of forest land restoration. You cannot do otherwise. Land tenure, as indicated even by the colleague there, if the land tenure is not secure, then we cannot guarantee that people will have access and benefit from their investment. Now talking about the, are we taking in account indigenous species in the assessment of tree germplasm supply? Yes, I think when I was presenting, I showed also a slide where we were trying to prioritize species based on even the producers' interest. So we have agroforestry and indigenous species where these farmers actually prioritize what is important for them, and this take in account those producing foods, those producing medicinal medicine, and any other important important products from NTFPs. And also we have exotic one, because we have to make sure that the forest restoration is inclusive, taking in account not only these exotic species, but also these indigenous species, also species being taken up by forestry department in many countries. So yes, we have all those priority species for each category of planter, because the forest restoration initiative is based on the objective of the planters. So they, based on the objectives, they select the species which are more important for them, and they have to be supported in producing and having good quality gem plant from these preferred species that could really incentivize them in investing in this forest land restoration. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marie, for that. Now we go to our colleagues online. We can start with Professor Labode Popola from Nigeria. I think you are still there. Please, you have the floor. We cannot. Can you hear him? We cannot hear him. Can you wait, Professor Labode, for the technicians here to see if we can hear you?
Prof. Labode, you are muted. Prof. Labode, just a minute, they are working on the sound issue. Sorry.
While they are working on the sound issue, if we can take a question, that is any other question from here? If no, then we give our colleagues online the priority. Otherwise, others can also go into the chat and put your questions in the chat so that you can take them up, because we're experiencing a little bit of a problem here, hearing you. Yeah, yes.
Maybe in the meantime, I can have a quick question. Yeah, I was just in another session, the science session of today, where they were showing a little bit of map of the suitability map of some species with regard to climate. Particularly, they displayed one species that is very common in the Sahel, Balanites, which we all know that is oil-producing species. And with all the crises ongoing now, we know these species will really have a very good value in terms of potential, commercial potential. And Professor Lawanu can confirm in Niger, there is a Swedish family that is settled there up in there. Okay, so I can proceed. Professor can testify that up in Zende, there is a Swedish family there that is able really to extract Balanites oil in a...
We can't hear the speaker, we can't hear him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what should I do then?
I hear him.
Okay, if I can proceed, so just to say it quickly, this family is able really to extract the oil, and beside this COP, we had a meeting really to discuss on the particular issue of Balanites, really. Because they did a lot of studies on this species, the oil.
We are not hearing the speaker, please. Yes, we are not hearing the speaker. Fortunately, I hear you. Hello.
Hello, we are working on that. Can you hear us? We are working on that.
Okay.
So you can hear us now?
Yes.
Oh, very good.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Maybe you use that mic.
Can you hear me? Virtual?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I proceed. I take again my question. It's a very quick question that I wanted to have to fill the gap, since we had some connection issues with you. So I wanted to have a question on the suitability mapping of some of the species with regard to climate, and also the trend in climate change, which will affect really where we can have appropriate selection of species to match the site that we want to restore. And I was alluding to one session, the science panel session where I was, and they were displaying some figures on balanitis, some modeling. We show that by 2070s, if the trend in climate change continues like that, we will have issues really with some key species, including balanitis, which we see that really is a species that could have a great potential for the Sahel, because you know the crisis ongoing. The oil also is quite a very product that is demanded, and the particular oil of this species, Professor Lawanu can testify. In Niger there is a Swedish couple, and I was impressed. They are certainly in Niger up in the north, and since the 70s, extracting the oil of balanitis particularly, they are able really to do it in large quantities, selling it to international market. And my question, just a little bit to summarize, is there any particular work maybe that IFF can really lead into some of those species that we know that they are very well suited to the Sahel, and at the same time scientific evidence are more and more indicating that they won't be there in the long run. So I think there is something that we need to do really to anticipate on what may happen in the near future or the long future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. We will answer it together with the other questions that come from online. Maybe someone else may ask something that is related to that. Now we go back to Professor Labode Popola. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you, but can you hear me too?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, very good, very good. So I want to commend everybody. This process being led by AFF, very commendable. My concern and a suggestion is the need for us to intensify ownership of some of these processes. We have heard about security stations. We don't have them in oil palm private sector organizations. They are owned by private people. I think it's important that we intensify more and more people's ownership, and it's already spreading down south to Nigeria, down south to some other countries in the humid lowlands of West Africa. What can the regional bodies do about?
And to who must they build in different areas? Specific, and is it by practice or by training and capacity in what? On capacity building, because it's not true that we don't have the capacity completely. For example, are we aware of any regional knowledge that could be taken into? We really need it to be a